The Seahawks have enjoyed as good of continuity along the offensive line as any team in the NFL, but that will be tested protecting Sam Darnold's blindside on Thursday Night Football against the Rams. We'll be breaking it all down here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, here on our Wednesday episode by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in, whether you're in Kirkland, Washington, or listening from Salt Lake City, Utah. Thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. Seahawks and Rams getting ready to duke it out on Thursday Night Football. A significant injury to watch for both teams. We'll be diving into that. We've got keys to victory for the Seahawks. How can they settle the score, even it up here, and take first place by themselves in the NFC West and atop the NFC? We've got picks to click, game predictions, all coming your way courtesy of our friends over at Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Now for your lead story here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Just like the entire rest of this week, everything is condensed with the Seahawks and Rams playing on Thursday Night Football. We had final injury reports drop today, and Rob, it was actually the smallest one that the Seahawks have had this entire season, with just one player listed. Unfortunately, the one player that was listed, this is not one we were surprised by. I think you and I both thought that Charles Cross was probably going to miss this game, suffering a hamstring injury on that last field goal that won the game for the Seahawks on Sunday. And as it turns out, that is exactly the case. No Charles Cross on Thursday Night Football against the Rams with their two stud edge rushers. I know that a lot of people are going to be looking at this and saying, oh boy, this is the kind of loss that could ultimately swing this game into the Rams' favor. But the Seahawks at least have a backup in Josh Jones, who has started 21 games in his career, and left tackle's the position he played at Houston. That's where he's most comfortable. He's played quite a bit next to Gray Zabel because Charles Cross missed a big chunk of training camp in the preseason with that dislocated finger that required surgery. So he got a lot of reps next to Gray Zabel at the left tackle spot. So I know that a lot of fans are going to be screaming that the sky is falling. I urge you not to feel that way. Not that I'm saying that this is not a big loss, because it certainly is. But I am urging fans to at least be patient here with Josh Jones, because he has started a lot of games in the NFL, and the Seahawks staff has confidence in him.
They should have confidence in him. I mean, this was a 4-year starter at Houston, a prolific passing attack at the college level. As you mentioned, he started 21 games in the NFL. He is a player that I personally was very high on when he was coming out of Houston. He's 6'7". He's 315 pounds. He is very light on his feet. He has a lot of the same strengths that Charles Cross possesses. Now, I do have some concerns, no question about it, especially going up against Jared Verse, just because one of the things that Verse does very well is he uses a bull rush, and anytime that you are as tall as Josh Jones is, then you are going to be susceptible to guys getting under your pads and pushing you into the backfield. At the same time, that is one of the things that Sam Darnold has done a remarkable job of, is being able to recognize when he has blockers being pushed into him, and he's been able to kind of dip and duck his way into the to step up into the pocket and still be able to get passes off. So this is a significant injury. There's no downplaying when you're talking about a player who is as critical to Seattle's success as their star left tackle. At the same time, as you mentioned, Corbin, this is not an injury that has caught us by surprise. I mean, literally on our Monday show, I talked about that this was going to be something that the Seahawks fans had better anticipate, that Josh Jones might be the starter at left tackle. And for those of you who were listening for that show, you already know. If you were not listening or watching, go back to Monday's episode. Thank you so much for all of the support. But do a little bit of homework, because is the Seahawks obviously are going to have to be doing some homework on their own to prepare for this game. But I do think that this is not one of those the sky is falling, although the weather may suggest that it is. I think that Seattle is going to be able to absorb the loss of Charles Cross because they have a quality backup in Josh Jones ready to seize this opportunity, as so many other backups, so-called backups, have for the Seahawks as well this season.
Yeah, and I was one of a number of reporters that got to talk to Josh Jones in the locker room today after Mike McDonald confirmed that he was going to be starting the left tackle position. And he made it clear, like, look, this is his job now. That he's had to make an adjustment when early in his career he started a lot of games at 3 different positions. He started at left tackle, right tackle, and right guard for the Arizona Cardinals. They moved him around quite a bit. His third season, it was primarily the left tackle spot that he was at, and that's where he's most comfortable. But he, the last 2 years, has been playing as a backup tackle, a swing tackle, and that role he has had to adapt to, and he has had to make sure he's ready to play on either side any given week. And it was for an opportunity like this. It's going to be the first game he started in 2 years. He started in 2023, 3 games for the Houston Texans, and that year he moved around multiple spots, got some left tackle action for the Texans as well. But he's bounced around. This is a guy, though, that has started 21 games in the league, and he's got the athletic profile for this system, running a zone style. I think this is going to be one of those feel-out periods for Clint Kubiak early, just kind of seeing where he's going to need support, how often he's going to need to support Josh Jones. And we'll see. They might out of the gate, they might start off giving him a lot of help from running backs and tight ends because Jared Verse and Byron Young are both really good pass rushers. Byron Young's got 11 sacks this year, and he's a speedster. So they're going to be trying to test. I will not be surprised. In fact, I would be surprised if Chris Shula doesn't do this. I'm expecting to see some overloads towards that side. I'm expecting to see some blitzes, some stunt packages, and really test where his chemistry is at on that side of the line. But they do have that experience with him and Gray Zabel from training camp. That's more than a lot of teams would have in this particular situation. And you added his experience. Look, it's not ideal against the Rams, but I'm not going to sit here and say that this game is already decided because of this injury. I think the Seahawks have the coaching staff, and I think they have the backup here to be able to weather this storm and find a way to still be successful with their backup left tackle in the lineup.
No question about it. I mean, that was one of the things, as you mentioned, Corbin, you had insight because you were there and were able to, interview Josh Jones in person. Well, I have some fairly unique insights as well in terms of having been with the New Orleans Saints training camp the last couple of years and seeing John Benton work and then knowing the fact that he has always prioritized using his offensive linemen in rotations. This is not just the ones going up against the ones on offense going up against the ones on defense or the twos on defense. He constantly was shuffling in his backup offensive linemen into different positional groups to make sure that they were prepared for this. Frankly, that's been one of the strengths of Benton and Rick Dennison and Clint Kubiak in the past. And we've talked about this, is that they would often sprinkle in their young players into critical roles to give them legitimate experience. So, no, do I think that there is going to be a drop-off when you're talking about a player of Charles Cross's caliber to any backup? Yes, but I think that the Seahawks fans who are fretting about this should go back and remember those Super Bowl days with Russell Okung at left tackle position, and the fact that he went down at times. It was George Fant that had his opportunities. The injuries are unfortunately going to happen. That's just one of the obvious aspects of this football game. I believe that Josh Jones is a legitimate starting caliber offensive tackle in the NFL. He is going to have some struggles in this particular football game, I believe. I do think that Seattle is going to be using their backs, using tight ends to kind of help, to try to help against the Rams pass rushers. However, I am a little bit more concerned about the power of Verse than I am the pure speed that is Byron Young. They're both terrific pass rushers. rushes. As you mentioned, Byron Young, 11 sacks this year. He is easily the Rams' top pass rusher. But at the same time, when the Rams overload on the left side, I have confidence in Sam Darnold to be able to recognize that. Gray Zabel is no longer a rookie at this point, and so I think that he is going to be able to handle the communication that is required to be able to help out Josh Jones in that spot.
When we come back, we've got keys to victory. How can the Seahawks even the score on Thursday Night Football and get a big win against the Rams to jump into first place in the NFC and NFC West standings? We'll get to that up next here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season, whether you're watching the NFL, NBA, or both. There's never been a better time to jump into the action. If you haven't tried it yet, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere Prize Picks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Prize Picks has added extra layers of excitement to the holiday season. Creating a lineup takes less than a minute. The app makes the whole process smooth and intuitive. You can choose from a huge range of unique stats, fantasy scores, field goals attempted, free throws made, turnovers, whatever fits your strategy. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups. After you play your first $5 lineup, that's the code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups. After your first $5 play, Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Welcome back to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s listening in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. And for all of our everydayers out there, you already live and breathe your team every day. Now take it up another level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Seahawks with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedonseahawks.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. That's lockedonseahawks.supercast.com. All right, Rob, we've got this massive rematch coming up, Thursday Night Football. First time that there's ever been 2 11-win teams playing each other in primetime midweek. NFC West, number 1 seed in the NFC, up for grabs right now with 3 games left to play. Just a monumental game for both of these teams, particularly for Seattle, because they've still got that game with the 49ers coming up in week 18. This is crucial. Seattle wants to win the division. So how do they get it done? How do they find a way to beat the Rams in this game? We've had another game between these teams 5 weeks ago to help guide this, but I'm curious on the offensive side of the football, what you think the Seahawks need to do to get this done, especially down their left tackle, Charles Cross.
Well, Corbin, I sent you a list of the different things that I thought that Seattle needed to do. I'm actually going to go in the reverse order here, just because the more I think about it, the more I see that Charles Cross's injury and what that is going to do. The weather reports sounds like the rain might be lessening, but the wind might be becoming more powerful. Then I'm going to start with the most obvious thing, and that is scoring points. Seattle's 50. I think that Seattle has to have at least a 50% red zone touchdown efficiency rate in this football game. Now, that actually is a little bit less than what Seattle has averaged over the course of the season. They're 57.45% over the course of the season. That's 17th in the NFL, kind of middle of the pack. But in these past 3 games, as we've talked about, Seattle's red zone touchdown efficiency is absolutely plummeted. It is 37.5% at this point. That's tied for 29th in the NFL with the New York Jets of all teams. So it has been obviously abysmal. Now, some good news is that, again, I do think that that there is just a track record of Seattle's success at home. Seattle is 10th in the NFL with 62.5% red zone touchdown efficiency at home this season. And frankly, I think that this is a game that Seattle has been, whether they want to admit it or not, I think that they have been kind of chomping at the bit for the last month to get another opportunity against the Los Angeles Rams. I feel confident that you will see improved play in the red zone, resulting in more touchdowns for Seattle.
Yeah, the red zone is crucial in this game. I mean, it's been a problem really for the last 4 games. If you look at the numbers, just a little over 40% touchdown rate. That is not close enough to being where they need to be at. But they were 1 for 4 in that first matchup. If they would have gone 2 for 4, they win that game. So I think 50%, that's assuming that they're going to get down there more frequently than they did against the Indianapolis Colts on Sunday. They've just got to be better. I mentioned this earlier in the week. I'm going with a concrete number here. I think the running backs, and this may sound counterintuitive with having a backup left tackle in, but I'm going to explain why it's not. I think your running backs have to have at least 5 catches in this football game. I'm not including the tight ends in there. I'm saying the running backs. I want to see Seattle find ways to get Ken Walker III and Zach Charbonnet matched up against Landman and Spates in the middle. I think that they have a major advantage there. They started to do it late in that first matchup. And honestly, yeah, you'd like to have your running backs chip and help out, but another way that you can speed things up and help your quarterback is having those running backs quickly get out into their routes and provide an outlet for them to dump the ball off so that Josh Jones doesn't have to block quite as long. And I think if you can do that a few times, that defense is going to start sucking up a little bit. And I think you could start taking some of those timely shot plays in there. So I've been arguing this all week. I just think that is a big part of the game plan against Chris Shula's defense. I'm getting Ken Walker III in particular heavily involved in my passing game right out of the gate.
Yeah, I think that is a sound strategy, and it's kind of, a hand in glove with kind of what I am going to be mentioning here. And I mentioned this previously this week. I really think that it's critical that Seattle diversifies who they are targeting in the passing game. So whether it be running backs, whether it be tight ends, frankly, I don't care. The reality is that the Seahawks only had 2 pass catchers in the last game against the Rams who had more than 3 receptions. I think that you have to have at least 3 players that have 5+ catches. Last time it was 10 catches, game high, 10 catches for 70 yards from A.J. Barner, 9 catches for 105 yards for Jackson Smith-Njigba, and then the next closest one was K9 with 3 catches for 44 yards. Cooper Kupp had 2 catches. Rashid Shaheed had 2 catches. Again, I think you have to have at least a third receiver who gets at least 5 receptions in this football game, allows Sam Darnold to be able to kind of scan the entire field rather than just honing in on 1 or 2 players and allowing the Rams basically to be in position to make big plays.
As for the other side of the football, look, the Seahawks, they held the Rams to 21 points, and that number is inflated from the perspective that the Rams scored off of a couple of turnovers in that game, and the defense was put in some bad spots. They held Matthew Stafford to 120 passing yards. Kyron Williams, after having a couple big runs in the first half, they bottled him and Blake Corum up in the second half. So they had as much success as anybody has had against the Rams this year in that first game, and yet there were still some things that they wish they could have done. They wish they could have started faster, particularly against the run. I look at this matchup. I'm not going to sit here and say you got to sack Matt Stafford 3 or 4 times because I don't think that's going to happen. Matthew Stafford does such a good job of getting the football out of his hands, and he's just such a tough guy to sack. With that being said, I think they've got to get at least 2 sacks and 5 quarterback hits in this game. And I'm really emphasizing the quarterback hits. They've got to find a way to get more than just a casual pressure that speeds him up a little bit. They got to hit him a few times. And they did not do that much in the first matchup, but they were able to get him off of his feet a little bit in terms of having some pressure that sped him up. I think they need to get some more hits, particularly with the home crowd. I think if you can get some big hits on him, especially with the weather looking like it's going to be rainy and windy, this could be a game where if you can make a couple big hits, it could really come up big for you and create a turnover in those conditions.
Oh, no question about it. That you're basically taking the words right out of my mouth there with the big hits on Matthew Stafford. He's only been hit more than 5 or more times, 3 games in this entire season so far. The Philadelphia Eagles did it. They hit him 5 times. And of course they got a victory. The Colts did it 5 times. The Jacksonville Jaguars actually did it 6 times. But that's it. Those are the games in which Matthew Stafford was knocked to the ground 5+ times. There's only been 2 games where he's been sacked 3 times. So yeah, I think that the Seahawks fans out there who are calling for 4, 5, 6, 7 sacks, it's just not very realistic. I mean, the man gets the ball out of his hands so quickly. Now, I do think that there is a possibility that there is going to be more pressure on Darnold because of the crowd noise, because of the weather conditions, because Davante Adams is listed as doubtful, has not practiced at all this entire week. Now, so that obviously is going to force the Rams to look elsewhere. And that is, again, one of the areas I think that Seattle could be a key for Seattle defensively is no touchdowns allowed to the tight ends. Look, Sean McVay is brilliant. He is going to come up with ideas that I am certainly not thinking of at this point. But so far, when Davante Adams has not been on the field, then all Matthew Stafford has basically done is relied on Puka Nacua and then the tight ends. Now, whether it be Colby Parkinson, who had 2 touchdowns last week, and he also had a touchdown against the Seahawks in that victory, a month ago, whether it be Colby Parkinson, whether it be Davis Allen III, whether it be Tanner Ferguson, the rookie that was actually selected ahead of Elijah Arroyo, there are tight ends here for the Rams to exploit. I think that one of the keys to victory is Seattle has to eliminate the Rams tight ends. So no touchdowns for Rams tight ends. And I think that Seattle has a good opportunity to basically force Matthew Stafford to rely on Puka Nacua. And if you can make him one-dimensional, then I think that you have a real chance of pulling off this game.
And I also think if Davante Adams is not playing in this game, which he's doubtful, I will be stunned if he suits up in this game. But without him, the Rams don't necessarily have the downfield threats like that. That's just not out there for them. So I think the after the catch is going to be crucial, limiting the opportunities, particularly against Nacua, who's so good at breaking tackles and creating yardage after the catch. The tight ends do that. The running backs in the passing game, Seattle's got to limit the yak. I think if they can hold the Rams under 80 yards, and that might seem like a lot, but 80 passing yards after the catch for the entire game, I think that they have a really good chance to win this one. If that balloons over 100, then I think that the Rams are going to be really difficult to beat because that is going to be a key for them without Davante Adams, his ability to win downfield. Even at this stage of his career, he's the best that they have in that regard. This is a game where you've got to tackle, you got to get guys to the ground, and you've got to limit the yards after the catch. When we come back, we're going to dish out our weekly picks to click, and we've got game predictions. That's coming your way here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Welcome back to Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks and the Rams getting ready for their rematch, the most anticipated rematch of the season. 2 11-3 teams. The winner takes first place in the NFC West and first place in the NFC standings. So no pressure. There's nothing on the line. There's nothing at stake in this contest. Let's get to our weekly picks to click, and we'll start on the offensive side of the football. Seattle had a tough time last week with no touchdowns on offense. Had to wait till the end of the game to do that against the Rams the first time around. It's been kind of a rough going on offense for large chunks of the last 4 or 5 games for this football team. But when you look at who needs to come through the big game or who you think's going to have a big game for the Seahawks on offense, who comes to mind for Thursday night?
Well, I think that the obvious answer would be Jackson Smith and Jigba, but we're not interested in obvious answers at this point. And so I'm going to mention a player that I think that, just seems like every time that he gets legitimate opportunities, then he makes the most of them. And that being Zach Charbonnet. I really think that there's no question that Kenneth Walker III has greater speed. I love the fact that you mentioned Kenneth Walker III as possibility as a receiver. I think that his speed against the Rams linebackers could result in the type of big play that can turn this game on its head. At the same time, I also think that Zach Charbonnet has the power, the vision, and just the sheer drive that frankly, at times I have not seen from Kenneth Walker III. And so I do think that when the chips are down, and they may be in this game, especially one, again, where the weather conditions force Seattle to run the football, I think that the fact that Braden Fisk may not be available for the Rams this game, he is listed as questionable. I think that Seattle may take a little bit more of a screw it, let's just run the ball right down their throat. I know there's a lot of Seahawks fans out there who would be pretty angry with that strategy. I don't know that necessarily is going to be the strategy that Clint Kubiak is going to take. I think that he is going to want to reestablish the line of scrimmage. The Seahawks were the more physical team the first time around, Corbin. They won in every conceivable category, whether it be third down conversions, time of possession, total yards, obviously not in turnovers. And that's one of the other areas in which I worry about Kenneth Walker III possibly getting the ball punched out. So to me, the more secure ball handler, the more decisive runner in between the tackles is Zach Charbonnet. I think that he is going to score a touchdown in this football game. I would not be surprised if it's more of the 10 to 20 yard variety rather than just a 1 or 2 yard kind of punch it in at the very end kind of a thing. And so again, Zach Charbonnet is my pick to click, a surprising pick to click perhaps, but my pick to click on offense for the Seahawks.
And I'm going to go with the guy that, look, the first revenge game did not go very well for Cooper Kupp, but Quentin Lake not being in the lineup for the Rams. He is kind of their Nick Emanwari. Not the same build, obviously, but he's a guy that can play in the slot. He can play both safety positions. And he had a lot of snaps against Cooper Kupp, his former teammate, in that first matchup. Feels like Kupp, we have been waiting for that big game from him. And there just hasn't been. There's been a couple games where he's gotten close. But I could see this being a game where he ends up getting after it against his former team, because I think that the injuries that this team has had in the secondary, and I just have a feeling Sam Darnold is going to be relying on his slots fairly heavily in this matchup too to get the football out. I just have a feeling Cooper Kupp is going to score a touchdown in this game. I'm going to go with 6 catches for 84 yards. That might not sound like the biggest game, but that would easily be the best game that Cooper Kupp has had this year overall. I think he is going to bring it tomorrow night. And he's going to give his old team some fits. There's been some good plays from the last few weeks. I think Sam Darnold is going to be looking more often for him, and that's going to open some things up for some of the other pass catchers if he is able to get involved. As for the defensive side of the football, I actually was kind of torn on this one, Rob, a little bit, because there was a few guys that jumped out to me, but I can't help it. I know Warren McClendon's played really well since he stepped into the lineup for Rob Havenstein, but I think Uchenna Nwosu has a prime advantage there. I think his ability to turn speed to power, his ability to bend around the corner and get after it, and his ability to slant hard inside when they do some stunt games, I have a feeling Uchenna Nwosu is going to get to Matthew Stafford at least once for a sack in this game. I'm going to give him a sack and 2 quarterback hits in this contest, and I think he does all that damage working against Warren McClendon. I just think his athleticism coupled with his underrated strength, I think that creates issues for McClendon. I'm looking for Nwosu to have an impact game rushing off the edge.
Yeah, I strongly considered Nwosu, DeMarcus Lawrence as well. I also considered Byron Murphy the second. We talked about in yesterday's show. I really think that he can be very effective inside and and give the Rams some trouble there with their center Coleman Shelton. As we mentioned in yesterday's show, Coleman Shelton struggled a little bit with some shotgun snaps. Again, with the weather potentially being an issue, that could be the type of big play that Seattle is looking for. That said, I think that to me, the most obvious candidate for big plays has been number 3, Nick Emanwari. And as I mentioned, I think that the Los Angeles Rams, if they don't have Devontae Adams, Matthew Stafford is going to be looking to his tight ends. I think that Emanwari is going to be right there in the middle of all of the traffic that's going over the middle of the field. I don't know that he necessarily gets an interception himself. He only had the 1 pass breakup and 3 tackles against the Rams the first time around. I think that he is going to double or even triple the number of pass breakups that he gets in this football game. I think there's going to be a pass that is deflected up into the air, and maybe one of his teammates is able to get it. And that could result in either a pick 6 or some other type of a quick turnover that is going to put Seattle in scoring position and, again, really turn this game on its head. So Nicky Memori, as far as specific statistics, I'm going to go with 7 tackles in this game. I think he's going to get a tackle for loss. And again, I think he's going to have multiple pass breakups, including one that ultimately results in either an interception or a big collision that results in the ball being popped out for a forced fumble.
Now the essential question, do the Seahawks get it done? Do they find a way to avenge the earlier loss at SoFi Stadium without their starting left tackle? The Rams are going to be missing Devontae Adams. So both these teams are missing significant pieces on offense. So it boils down to which team's going to have the more complete game, who's going to get it done in likely inclement weather at Lumen Field. Rob, do the Seahawks get it done, or do you see this as an unfortunate sweep at the hands of the Rams?
I do think that Seattle's going to get it done. And that's a change from what I said in the beginning of the season. I had the Seahawks going 13-4 to start the season with 2 losses against the Los Angeles Rams. However, Seattle played as well as they did at SoFi Stadium, or as I mentioned before, if not for the turnovers, then they would have easily won that game. I think that there is a scenario which they easily win this game, as shocking as that might sound to some. I think that Seattle is the faster, more physical, and better all-around football team. The fact that Mike McDonald went 1-1 against Sean McVay a year ago, I just have a hard time believing that this team has made so many strides in so many ways, and then again, statistically outplayed the Rams in their home stadium just a month ago, that now they're going to go 0-2 against the Rams. I just kind of struggle with that. So I have the Seahawks winning 20-17, and again, I think it is going to be a defense that is going to create some big plays, shorten the field for Seattle, and they're going to get a couple of touchdowns, perhaps one by Zach Charbonnet, as I mentioned before. And then again, a couple of big plays by Nicky Memori that's going to help him get the Defensive Rookie of the Year award, as well as help Seattle leave Lumen Field tomorrow night as the number 1 seed in all of the NFC.
Yeah, this is a coin flip game for me. I think if these two teams play 10 times, one wins 5 and one wins 5. So I think the Seahawks get it done here. And I know Charles Cross being out, there's going to be some people that say there's no way. But again, I think that the Seahawks can get by with Josh Jones for a start or two. I think he is a capable backup that can spot start. And I think the Seahawks will be able to scheme to be able to help him out some. And I do think throwing the ball to running backs is going to be part of that. I think this defense is playing too well right now. I don't think they're going to let the Rams come in and move the ball up and down the field on them. I think they're going to get a few turnovers. This is going to be my stunning thing. I think Seattle wins this 24-20. Sam Darnold throws no picks in this game. He might have a fumble, but he's not going to have an interception after throwing 4 of them last time. I think Sam Darnold is going to play within himself. I think the Seahawks are going to give him a game plan that allows him to be successful. And I think they eke this one out 24-20. We'll see what ends up happening. The biggest Thursday night game, arguably, there's been in Thursday night games with the records and what is at stake. Seahawks looking to get into first place, sole possession in the NFC West in prime time. You can follow me at X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, we got a game day crossover Thursday, Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Rams. We're going to keep deep diving into this crucial rematch. Make sure you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.